today we are going to talk about freedom from and freedom to. I am Deborah Henson-Conant, and I am here with Kathleen Wiley. I am a composer, a performer, and an online coach. I teach improvisation and creative expression, and Kathleen is a Jungian psychoanalyst. And she also has an online community that's all about embodiment. So we both teach embodiment in music and in life, and we both play the harp. And so we call this Jung at Harp. And we come with a question each day that we haven't answered. We've talked a little bit about it ahead of time to have the conversation with you. When we first met, we discovered that we just enjoyed thinking about things together and talking about things together, and that we learned so much from doing that. And we realized that it was part of the art of conversation. And we love that art, and we want to share it with you. And we found this platform online where we can share it with you, because depending on where you're watching this and when you're watching this, you can actually comment, and you are part of the conversation as well. So I wanted to talk about freedom from and freedom to, because it's something that I teach. I teach freedom. I'm always talking about freedom, and people are talking about freedom when they learn from me. They often talk about how simple it is and then how freeing it is. Back in college, I was having a conversation with someone once, and it was a guy. He happened to be going out with a woman who wanted to get married, wanted to have a committed relationship, and he wasn't sure. And so we were talking about freedom, and he said, well, is freedom the freedom to just like sleep with anybody I want? Or is freedom the freedom to have a deep relationship with this woman and not have to worry about those other relationships? Which is freedom? And so that started getting me thinking about freedom from and freedom to. And as I teach what I've learned, which is freedom from, I'm still learning this, but freedom from my own psychological blocks and my fears, freedom to be self-expressed. And then in my academy, that is what I am teaching people, is that same thing. And I have a feeling that you might have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, when I think of freedom in terms of psychologically, I immediately think of autonomy. The ability to move according to one's own nature. Autonomy meaning self-mastery, self-agency. So to truly be free, it means I move according to kind of the law of Kathleen. And for me, that's very congruent with Jung, because he says that every individual psyche has a gradient that its energy will follow, and that we can have a generic manual for psyche, but that each individual psyche needs their own manual, meaning that our skeletons psychologically, just like our physical skeletons, have a similar structure, but that gets fleshed out differently for each of us. So for me, freedom is very much the ability to move according to one's own true nature. Interesting. I Googled the definition of freedom as we were getting set up. And this is what comes up: the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. And then another definition is the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. So that's kind of interesting, because the dictionary's definition of freedom implies no constraints, no limitations. And actually, in terms of Jung's theory and my understanding of psyche, and also my studies from the Western mystery tradition, we actually have the greatest freedom when we operate within the true limitations of our own nature.
Yeah, that is, whoa, this is really interesting. I'm thinking so many things as you're speaking. One was, I was thinking of this. I don't know if it was a joke or not a joke once. So one woman was like saying, or let's just switch it, whatever. The man was saying, I want the freedom to be able to sing however I want. And, and his wife was like, I want the freedom to not have to hear you sing like that. And it made me think about, when, I don't even know what to say about that. But let's just, maybe someone else online will have something to say about that. We were talking about limitations and the true limitations, and then I was talking about one of the things that I'm teaching. I'm doing a workshop this Saturday online. Oh, and I'm going to put, and you can just go to my events page to find it, hipharp.com/events, and you'll see it there. It's called What is a Vamp? And a vamp is one of the greatest tools in the improv toolkit. It's a pattern that gets set up, that you set up. And there are infinite vamps, like they're literally infinite vamps. But for example, if I'm setting up a vamp, this is just a simple vamp. Let me put my harp in this key. I can't remember why I was thinking about this one, but I was. And it was like this. So that's the vamp. I mean, it could be. Oh, I know why I was thinking it. I was thinking it because in my piece Cosita Latina, there are two improv sections. One it's kind of hard to play because it moves all over the place, lots of different chords, and one that's very simple. I set up this vamp. Which is basically two chords, and then I improvise over it. I actually put it into a looper, and then I'm able to improvise. But I was showing you, I was being like, it's basically this bum, 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 bum. It's just two chords, bum. So you kind of don't have to think. So I'm not thinking about anything. I mean, this pattern has become quickly, like, it's just, I could do it really slow also. Like, it's not that I have to do it fast. The pattern is, and I use it a lot in a lot of different pieces. It has different ways, and you might not even notice that it's the same thing, but it's something I fell in love with as a kid. Love it. Always love it. Keep going back to it. It gives me the freedom to play, to just kind of go where I want to go. But it also gives somebody else the freedom, because if I tell them what key I'm playing in and I go like this, the minute I do that, somebody knows that and even a bass player could go. So it sets something up that becomes predictable. Sorry, I've been watching My Cat from Hell, and it's all about these cats that are like out of control, and the people are thinking that the cat is a demon, but then they eventually find out that the cat is scared in some way, and so it's hiding. And so so when I heard myself say the word predictable, that predictability gives comfort. And we were talking about, you were like, oh, so it's kind of like an anchor. And I was like, no. It's like the waves, but of course it's not the waves when they're going crazy, but there's something about that predictability, but it moves you forward. If you get lost, you can fall back on it. A vamp doesn't have a way that it has to be done. This vamp can be done like that, or it can be done this. It's the same basic vamp, meaning, and this is where I get lost in explaining it. And that's why I'm doing a whole workshop on it. And that's why I have a whole class on it. And that's why I have a whole quarter in Hip Harp Academy called The Power of Pattern, because the power of pattern gives us freedom. Now, how is that possible, Kathleen?
Well, if we didn't have patterns like the patterns of our respiration and our heartbeat and our digestion, we couldn't sit here and have this creative conversation, because we would have to be thinking about making those processes happen. But there are patterns, and it just so happened those patterns that I mentioned are patterns that are cellular patterns. They're part of our physiology now, our biological patterning. But this, the same is true for us psychologically. If I didn't have patterns of, for instance, one of my patterns, or we could even call it a rhythm, because I think that's the other
Mhm.
thing when you said the pattern or the vamp is an anchor, is the wave, not the
Mhm.
anchor. I'm
Mhm.
thinking it's the movement between the one chord to the other that's the wave for me. The
Mhm.
vamp, the chord, the pattern is
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
anchor, and the movement from one to the other chord is for me feels like the wave. It's the rhythm.
Mhm.
But we have our own rhythms, and part of my rhythm is I'm a morning person. I love being up before the sun is up. I love hearing the owls, right, as right before, the sun comes out. And I love waking up with the songbirds. And but that means I'm also probably sometimes in bed by 9 o'clock at night. And of course, I married a musician who, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he comes alive. And at 9 o'clock at night, he's still ready to go. And, that's his rhythm. I always laugh and say, I could have never been a professional musician. I didn't get the night gene. You got the night gene. And so it's kind of like I can rail against that, and believe me, early on in our relationship, he would really push me to come his way and I would go his way. And then it was not pretty for a few days. Because in addition to my being a morning person, I'm a Virgo with 3 planets in Virgo. Those of you who know astrology, that means I'm mutable earth. Mutable means I can change, but I'm like the earth in changing. You know how the tides change just a little bit every day. The time, the sun, the moon, a little bit every day. Don't push me to big. And so it's kind of like those are again are more physiological kinds of patterns, but they affect me emotionally. They affect me mentally. And we also have our patterns of again psychologically who we are and what feeds us and what doesn't feed us in terms of relationships, in terms of activities, in terms of studies. So so anyway, we need the patterns, and we need to know psychologically the patterns of our own nature in order to not get ourselves dysregulated.
And I just got it's so interesting because as you were first talking, I wrote down we don't have to manage these things. If we don't have to manage them, if then we have freedom from them. And
Right.
and that freedom from having to manage those things gives us freedom to be self-expressed. And it's interesting because I also wrote down I was just talking to my assistant last night and I said, please remind me on Monday morning to blah, 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 blah. And she was like, okay, I'll do that. Now I have freedom from trying to worry about managing that.
Right.
And oh, there's something important about that. I have freedom from that. Oh, and I realized that's part of what why the vamp gives you freedom. The predictability means that you don't have to remember, you don't have to manage
Right.
what you are why am I yelling? Okay, you don't have to manage what you're improvising over, and it gives you freedom to improvise with others because once you've set up this vamp, it's it's an agreement that you both it's like whatever constitution or whatever you have, whatever the agreement that you've made on which in which those freedoms exist.
Right.
And with depending on the musician, like because I've been doing this all my life, if I play with somebody, that vamp may morph as
Mhm.
we're playing. And as long as I am clear or they are clear about the pattern they're going to, we're able to follow each other. And then that becomes part of the joy of it. And then there's freedom within our relationship as well.
Mhm. Yeah, so the predictability, whether
Right.
we call it the anchor or the predictability of the rhythm of the wave, that predictability, that natural operating principle or law, then allows one's to put one's attention and focus on other things. And in music, how important that is. That if in the improvising situation I've got that anchor or that wave, that rhythm that I just relax into. reminds me of sometimes when I'm swimming in the lake and there's a lot of, it's either really windy or there's a lot of boat activity. And so there are waves coming in. That there's a point where if I just can relax into it, it's like being rocked. And I'm
Right.
held in that rocking. And for me, when I drop into the music and what you're talking about, I have that feeling. It's like I'm being rocked back and forth. I'm being held in it.
That's right. And a vamp
Yeah.
often has the characteristic of rocking.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
You know, it's funny when you were talking about, I don't remember what made me think about this, but knowing the conventions or knowing what my freedom is rather than worrying, am I doing something wrong? Am I transgressing? And I know that as a child, first, I don't know why I didn't learn a lot of things that other people seem to be obvious. And so, and I mean, maybe we moved, I don't know, maybe I'm on the spectrum. I don't know why, um, but that experience of like, I don't know when I am going to step on someone. I just don't know. And um, that feels very, anxiety provoking. And I do
Mhm.
not feel free. A vamp I'm just going to keep coming back to
Mhm.
vamps because it's what I'm looking at this week. And it's a real entree into the power of pattern. A vamp, oh, it gives me, I'm not worried about stepping on someone's toes. Maybe somewhat. And it can happen in improvisation that someone, if you don't have a structure there, you can step on someone's toes, but these structures allow you to play. This list goes back to My Cat from Hell. I'm telling you, I'm telling you this, the scenes where two cats are learning how to actually be together.
Mm.
Okay, so back to freedom from and freedom to. And I loved, Kathleen, when you made the description of this, you actually asked a question. What is freedom to you? Where do you move towards your true expression? What do you need freedom from in order to share your authentic self creatively and in day-to-day life? And I know if you are out there, and I know there are people watching, I know it's a holiday today, at least in the United States. But we encourage you, we love to have your comments on this as well, because this really is a conversation. So Kathleen, I'll ask you these questions. In music, how about you? What gives you a sense of, I don't want to go back to exactly how you wrote this because I
Mm.
really loved it. Where do you move towards your true expression? And I know you've talked about this recently when you've actually experienced a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
do you need freedom from in order to share your authentic self creatively and in day-to-day life?
So part of what I need freedom from, um, in both my day-to-day life and my music, is that there is an expectation of how it should be done. So part of what kills off my comfort level and relaxation at the harp quicker than anything is this an expectation of it should be a certain way, or I should get it in a certain length of time, or I should experience it a certain way, or I should play it someone like someone else does. So I need freedom from that. And when I can have freedom from that, then what that gives me freedom to move towards is really discovering what speaks to me and what resonates for me. I actually had that experience again this morning. I allowed myself, even though I'm in North Carolina and the humidity can be bad, I love the outside. In the early morning, I love being outside. And this morning it was like, 76, 77. And I thought, I'm just taking our harp, my Merlin, and we're going out on the upper deck because I wanted to play my harp, but I wanted to be outside. And then I spent about 5 minutes trying to talk myself out of why that was a bad idea because the harp was going to go out of tune because of the humidity. And then I thought, I don't care. I don't
Yeah, I
care.
mean, they are supposed to go. They're not harps if they're completely in tune and don't go out of tune. By the way,
I know. So
they're spies from some other
I
place.
know, I know. So I did. I moved my harp bench outside. I have a board when I take my harp outside that I put down, and I put my harp on the board. But I ended up improvising for a little bit, just playing in the chord of G. G Mixolydian. And what I discovered is that the beginning of the improv was very slow and much more meditative, but by the end of it, it was at a brisker pace. And it was that comfort level for me of going with where my energy was, instead of having to start off at a breakneck speed that's not at all where I was at. And so that experience of being able to be with my own natural, how do I want to say that? There's so many things. It's like relaxing into what I was doing, feeling my own expertise, feeling my own technical skill. And then as I began to hear it and feel it speed up, to be able to speed up with it, and those things were still there.
Yeah, I hear that you engaged with it and then you began to follow it. And then you
Mhm.
and it followed each other. And going back to My Cat from Hell, I just want to say that when a cat is hiding, it reminded me of watching the cat come out and then playing and playing. And I just want to say to people, you were talking about the Mixolydian mode. So that means that she was playing, her harp was in the key of C, which is like all the white keys of the piano, but she was choosing the G note as the center. And when you do that, it sets up a very interesting scale
Mhm.
that has this real openness to it. And I don't know if you were doing this, but it's also a beautiful one because you can go to the note below it.
Mhm.
It's great. It's a beautiful, beautiful scale. And
Yeah.
what a wonderful thing. And so I love this because I was talking about vamps setting up a pattern,
Mhm.
but you just talked about setting up almost an environment or a playground for freedom.
Mm.
So mine had a periodicity in it that was a pattern that you could come back to,
Right.
but yours was a landscape that
Mm.
had freedom.
Mm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
depending on and what's amazing about there's many amazing things about music, but one of the things that's amazing about the modes is it's as if you had a playground, and depending on how you looked at it, it would be almost a completely different playground. So, I mean, that's just going into talking about the modes, just because there are other modes that I love to play in. But the point being that you took something that has infinite possibilities
Mhm.
and you chose one landscape to explore. And that gave you freedom. And I also heard that you created an environment that you were really showing up in, that you really loved. And so what I'm hearing is like this, it's all like if you were each spirits or something, I'm just
Mhm.
imagining this, moment in which you both connected. And
Mhm.
I I don't know why this came into my head, but it's like, and I would say that the harp felt as much freedom as you did in this relationship.
Yeah, I think Merlin does. Yeah, yeah.
I don't usually think that way, but
I what you're saying about the landscape, just one of the ahas that just went off for me is that it is the landscape in which I relax into the greatest freedom versus the specific. Well, I'm going to say this, but then I'm not sure it's true. Then the specific pattern being, but yet within the landscape, I was doing a pattern. I started with a broken G octave in the left hand, and then I was doing the crab in the right hand, you know, and that was where I started.
wait,
But
what do you
then
mean by crab? What do you mean
I,
by crab?
string,
Like,
string, skip, string, string.
okay, like,
I call that the,
like,
yeah. So G, A, skip the B, C, and D.
so,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I see. So setting up
And, and,
another
and so
scale.
that's
Okay.
where I started. And but I didn't stay there. I mean, I did then move around, but what the aha I'm having is how for me a day off means I have no appointments that have a set time or I
Mm.
have to be anywhere or do anything at a set time.
So freedom from
That
obligations. Okay.
right. And having to be on the Johnny on the spot, I have to be here. And of course, as a psychoanalyst, starting and stopping on time is a big deal.
Yeah.
So for me, a day off where I really relax is I don't have any set appointments. And so there's the
Wow.
aha I had was that's like then a landscape I create. It's a wide open, like, okay, I can go to this playground or this playground, or I'm in the park, I can do this trail or this trail. And so for me with the music, what I got with what you said is the starting point for me is the landscape. Then I can move to the trail or the playground or the pattern. But if I
Yeah.
start without the landscape I want, I disconnect from myself. I don't intend to, but there's something that gets shut down.
So I'm hearing a freedom from patterns, like as well. Like I'm hearing you're like, I am. I'm exploring the landscape of this in my way.
Mhm.
Now I get that I'm going to a different key, but a different note, but whatever, if that's okay. And that's what I'm doing. And then so that might be me going from a landscape into a pattern. And then but one of the things that is amazing is when you are improvising by yourself or someone else and you trust each other, you actually can then exit that. I'm just going to try it for a minute. So here I am, and I'm in the landscape, and I'm setting up a pattern. It happens to be a bossa. That's what I'm into this morning. And it's a vamp. So now I just and then I shifted out of that pattern into what might be another landscape.
Right.
In which, and now I'm thinking about another landscape, and now I want to try what happens. Well, okay, that's really interesting to me, what I just did. Landscape, vamp, new landscape, which happens to be in the relative minor, new vamp, come back. It actually gave me a shape I don't think I have ever played with in music.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. It's like stepping through one garden and finding, stepping through one meadow and finding one garden or one stream, and then stepping a little further and finding a different stream, and then coming back.
Yeah, as you're saying that, it reminded me of dreams I've had, and that some of my analysis also have. It's the kind of dream where you're in a house and you realize there are rooms in the house you've never explored.
I love
You know,
that.
it's
Yes.
like aspects of one's own psyche one's never explored, and the music that you've never found inside yourself in the outer world. It's that place of discovery, which that's freedom, isn't it? When we can discover, we don't have to shut down. And so a freedom to be able to discover that which is yet to be known is beautiful. And I think that's so much what truly embodying our authentic self, or what Jung called individuation, is about. It's about living into previously unexpressed, unknown parts of ourselves.
Oh, I want to come back to that because I
Yeah.
think safety is in there. And I want to also pull up this message. Proto Andre Lettres says, I understand that going from the general to the particular is more free and less stressful than starting on a specific pattern, and also gives an environment between changing patterns. And my brain is like, but really, is that true? I mean, whatever I hear, like, it's like, what's the opposite? I understand that going from the general to the particular is more free. And I'm always going to think like, is that true? Or can both be true? Can we go from the general to the particular, or from the particular to the general? Like, but I think this is a really important question. Like, because when I was doing, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly, but so this is kind of general. And then it goes to the particular. And then I hear this as being general again. I don't know why I hear it that way. Because there's nothing necessarily structured there. I don't know. Maybe I am being structured and I don't know it. And but I think I'm getting a different kind of freedom from that. Oh, right. Right. Because sometimes we'll ask people to put the harp in just like a completely random tuning. Absolutely, totally, like I'm just putting the blah, 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 blah. There's nothing here. It's just completely like that. And then to explore gestures, like musical gestures, like, or even, but you can't do them wrong because the harp is all just like like that. So this is what an interesting thing. I love this from, what that idea of going from the general to the particular, freedom. When is it stressful? When is it freedom? And there's another thing I just realized that's really interesting about the harp is that you can literally set up tunings that kind of have guardrails, this tuning that we all know about harps, in which the pattern is already set up for you, and there's no note you can play that, because there's only 5 notes there. I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm hoping that something will come into your brain. And so starting on a specific pattern and gives it an environment between, okay, I understand that going from the general to the particular is more free and less stressful than starting on a specific pattern. Oh, I see what this is being said here. Starting in the general and going to a pattern is less stressful than starting on the pattern. I love that. And also gives an environment between changing patterns. I see. So creating an on-ramp for your engagement with the music. Wow, I love that. Thank you. I'll pull this up, and anything, just stop me, Kathleen, because my coffee is just like coming out my mouth. And Deb says it's the same with horses. If we give them a boundary in the ring, instead of letting them run willy-nilly, we can accomplish structured movements that feel more free, less stress. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, and do they also do that in the wild? Do they also start making patterns together with boundaries that we may not necessarily be aware of, but that boundaries can also be like maps, something to follow.
Yeah. Gosh, there are 2 or 3 thoughts I have about what Deb said and what Proto said. So I'm going to go back to Proto for a minute. In Jungian psychology, we talk about the objective psyche and the subjective psyche. The objective psyche being the collective unconscious and all of the instinctive archetypal energies that are common to all of us. And then the subjective psyche being one's own personal psychology and how those instincts and archetypes have been fleshed out and what the patterns are that are specific to one's own individual constitution and temperament and historical self. So that there is a way that we all start out with the larger template, the objective, but then it moves into the particular nuances of who we are. And so understanding that and beginning to be able to differentiate, is this really mine? Is this a particular subjective Kathleen that's innately who I am? Or is this the adaptive or historically conditioned Kathleen that's trying to fit somewhere that's not really who I am? So, this idea of going from general to particular, also we see it in our psychological development of moving from this objective self into the particular subjective being that we are. And then with boundaries, the boundary that we need, that, and I love the idea of the horse ring, is that that ring we might say is a symbol of the self, the larger self we all are, the power greater than ego that's in each of us. And when we move within that ring, that circle of wholeness of our true nature, then we are able to accomplish structured, focused, particular patterns or movements in a much less stress-free way, because we again are operating with our own natural arena instead of trying to operate outside of someone else. And maybe a piece of in our conversation, the difference in how I'm what I'm talking about and experiencing, and what you were saying about the patterns in the beginning, is that when you bring up the pattern, you're already in the landscape of it, because that feeling tone, that affective connection, it's already there for you, is my guess. That you associate it with that, so you already bring that to the pattern.
Oh, I see.
Whereas if I learn a pattern that you're showing, I'm not necessarily there automatically.
Right. Thus do I have a whole class on it of breaking it
Uh-huh.
down.
Uh-huh.
It was what you said a minute ago about these, are bleh. It reminded me of what happens when people grow up in their relationship to music, reading music and thinking
Mm-hmm.
that the reading is the music. And then what you said about, and I can't remember whether it was before we started or after we started recording, something about, if when I'm worried about, am I playing the right notes? Do I sound good? And then many people will think, is this what the composer intended? Blah, blah, blah. Um, those constraints are really just part of the a certain construct of music that has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with music itself. And I think that and yet it's wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful that we have the literature of music. Um, and I just realized that one of the things that I'm doing as I'm constantly working with people to find their self-expression and to break away from everything that can impose on us is to break music down to its components. So we
Mm-hmm.
begin to understand what are the fundamental parts of music rather than this big construct. And I don't, somehow that jumped out to me as you were
Mm-hmm.
speaking, being able to break apart what is truly being a gracious person
Mm-hmm.
versus, am I doing manners right?
Yes, yes, yes. It's a great example. I had this moment when you were talking about the written music, and you said it's great we have the literature of music. Suppose if in our languaging, instead of talking about, okay, I'll give you the music, if we said, oh, here's the musical notation, or here is the written notes of the music, how that would begin to distinguish music as the energetic phenomena that's coming through versus the written notes. It's one of those places where our language can, and how we talk about things, can really contribute to something becoming
Right.
something it isn't.
Right. I mean, imagine if we thought that the only way we could speak to each other correctly was if we were word for word perfectly reciting something that someone wrote, and that was the only way that I could actually communicate correctly to you.
Right. It would be terrible. It would be stifling.
Okay, so this is beautiful. I know we're coming to the end, and I feel like we're coming to that an awareness of what's stifling, what stifles. And it's so interesting because what I just got from what you said, and I think this is the emotional impact for me. but why do we want freedom?
Mm.
And what I got from what you just said is the freedom to connect, to belong, to 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 be somewhere, to inhabit, and the freedom that is what we are looking for in whatever patterns we set up, whatever we create as the boundaries or the foundations of our freedom. And okay, I'm just going to pull this. We don't usually read these first. Are you saying we feel free? We don't feel the boundary because we ourselves are the boundary?
I would
What
say
an interesting
yes.
thought. Okay, well, I want to read it. Are you saying we feel free? We don't feel the boundary. Oh my God. Sorry. I'm thinking, right. I don't feel the boundary of, I don't know. I'm going to think about this a lot because this makes me think about my body. I don't feel the boundary of my body. I do, and I don't. And there's some science fiction stories about this that are, well, there's one that's just beautiful. You're making me think of it, because we ourselves are the boundary, the safe place within which we can roam without fear. I would say that is, I would love to be that for myself.
And I want to say, I think this is the state that spiritual masters in all traditions achieve. And I think it is what the alchemists work toward as the alchemical opus. And I think it is that which Jung really says that the human being, we can have moments. I don't know, unless we become a spiritual master, we live in this state all the time. But when we move in congruence with ourselves, when we live within the boundary of our own energetic being, which also includes the body, but is more than the body, then we are safe, and we're safe to roam without fear because we're true to ourselves. We know ultimately.
Well, I'm also thinking, as you speak, I'm thinking of what I've thought about for many months about the transformation of caterpillar to butterfly, and that each different form still is the boundary. It transforms its whatever abilities, its engagement with the world, but it doesn't become, or it is what it is. It's just transforming it into another shape of a boundary, with more that allows it engagements with other parts of the world.
Yeah, and I'd like to just offer in part of as our closing thought is that throughout this entire conversation, I've been thinking two things. One is about Annie Murphy Paul's book, The Extended Mind, Thinking Beyond the Brain. She is a science writer who's looked at all this research about how thinking is a function beyond brain chemistry. And one of the sections in her book is thinking with other people. And so almost every week we come together to think together, and with those of you who have been here today, and how wonderful that is because it allows us to expand our own consciousness. And the second thing I just want to share is that in the Western mystery tradition, in the traditional tarot images, traditional like the Rider-Waite deck or Pamela Eakin's Tarot of the Spirit, key 12, which is the Hanged Man card, represents the principle of right limitation. And right limitation is when we live within the limitations of our own psyche soul. So I just want to offer that as we close, that freedom from constraints that are artificially imposed by all we've learned collectively, and the freedom to live within that which is our own natural constitution.
Beautiful. And I'd like to add to that within the boundaries of what we are, transformation can happen in a way that may seem absolutely magical, mystical, or impossible.
Yes.
So,
but they happen.
Right. And so thank you for this conversation. Thank you for this thought of freedom on this day. And we will not be here next week. I will be at the Somerset Harp Festival, about to teach a lot about freedom. And Kathleen, I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Wonderful.
And everyone else, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for everyone who took part, who shared, Donald and Deb and Proto, and for everyone else who was here during, after, and who's taking these thoughts into the world. And farewell. Go forth and harp on the good things in life.